So, a very first important announcement. This is probably the last video you're going to see with my hair like this. Today, I'm actually getting it shaved. Later on tonight, I'm doing a live stream of it. It won't be on here, unfortunately. It's going to be on my Facebook with a couple of my Facebook friends, purely because I got challenged by my uncle. Shaved my hair, and I thought, oh well, I'll raise some money for charity at the same time, and I've managed to raise about over £200, which I'm really happy with, going to Barnsley Hospice. So if you want to join in and donate, because like I say, after this video, although there is one other one coming out today, but after this video, chronologically, because I'm doing this on a Friday, before I film my next batch, I will be hairless, sans bald, as I say, going bald for Barnsley, as I've called it. Anyway, on to today's topic at hand. So, it's very obvious that the Tories are now trying to find a scapegoat, and they will try and find any scapegoat they possibly can. There's rumours of Boris meant to be going. The knives are being sharpened for Boris. There was obviously the whole things with Cummings. Should we get rid of Cummings now? There's still the whole thing of, if you get rid of Boris, who replaces him? And to be honest, the two, I'd say, guys that you could be replaced with, you've got Michael Grove on one end, and you've got the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who's made a lot of very good impressions because he happened to launch the furlough scheme. Other than that, that's it, really. There's no other two bar those two people who could potentially replace him. And as he said now, they're looking for a scapegoat. And they're not going to go with Boris. They're not going to go with Cummings. They don't want to blame the NHS because certainly that would absolutely destroy the Tory party, especially after we've seen all this massive goodwill an outpouring for the NHS during the past couple of months. So, who have they got to blame? Well, it starts today, ladies and gentlemen, the blame game. So, this comes from The Guardian, and the title of the article is Ministers Shifting Blame to Public Health England for Covid-19 Error, say experts. Experts have accused ministers of shifting blame for their own mistakes during the coronavirus crisis onto Public Health England, amid speculation that the agency may be scrapped. We'll get onto that later. Downing Street on Wednesday failed to guarantee that the Public Health England, or PHE, will survive in its present form as an executive agency of the Department of Health and Social Care when the government reviews its response to COVID-19. But it also did not rebut a report that Boris Johnson was referring to PHE when he said on a speech on Tuesday that parts of the government that seemed to respond so sluggishly to the pandemic. Without appointing blame, the Prime Minister had said, "It seems like a recurring bad dream when you are telling that your feet to run and they won't move." His remarks came 2 days after Sir Mark Sidwell, the Cabinet Secretary and head of the Civil Service, announced he would be standing down after weeks of anonymous briefings against him. Professor Gable Sally, an ex-regional director of public health for the southwest of England, said it appears ministers were trying to deflect blame onto others for the failures in testing and protective equipment that have contributed to the UK's high death rate. It was only a matter of time, the hunt for someone to blame. If ill befits Boris Johnson or any Tory to go about criticising the PHE. This is the government seeking to identify the fall guy for a gross and widespread failure of government. Its ministers are blaming others for their own failings, said Sally, who is the professor of public health at Bristol University. Professor John Ashcroft, a former director of Public Health England in the North West, said the government is trying to pass the buck for its own failures onto PHE. But there has been a political failure, a leadership failure, and also a technical failure by the PHE. It's made a series of serious mistakes during the crisis in all key areas that it is responsible for. tracing, testing, and personal protective equipment, and the gathering and sharing of intelligence. It's been poor on those accounts. The PHSE has come under intense scrutiny for its role in tackling the virus, and has attracted internal criticism in recent weeks from sources in and around the government about its performance. A senior PHE official said that this seems to be part of an undermining strategy by some people in the government, especially those in Downing Street. Testing strategy, the Department of Health and Social Care led on that. We run laboratories and increased our testing to 25,000 tests a day, which is the most we can do. Contact tracing, we did that, but only have 290 people for the whole of England. Who can do that? So as soon as it became obvious that community transmission was occurring, we shifted our efforts to that, the official said. Ministers are reportedly accusing the PHE for abandoning the tracing of recent contacts of people who tested positive for the virus on March 12th, which is now being regarded as a key early blunder during the crisis. However, James Brokenshire, the Home Office Minister, had previously admitted that the decision was prompted by the capacity restraints of England's limited system of testing swab samples rather than a strategic change by the direction of PHE. Christina Moriat, the Chief Executive of the Royal Society for Public Health, said, "We should try and avoid what could be a destructive blame game, with rash calls for overhaul and an undermining of the nation's ability to deliver an effective COVID-19 response at this vital moment. What is needed now is an honest and swift lessons learned review, so that the nation can respond as well as possible to any second wave." And asked whether the PHSE was under threat, the Prime Minister's spokesperson, the Prime Minister's spokesperson praised its role in the coronavirus crisis, but also stressed the need to ensure that institutions were fit to cope with future emergencies. Public Health England are playing a key role in our response, working on important issues such as detection, surveillance, and contact tracing and testing, he said. They have been working hard to help protect the country and provide insight in our efforts to beat the virus. The spokesperson also added, "We've made changes to structures already. For instance, we have set up from scratch NHS Test and Trace and the Joint Biosecurity Centre. Any future changes that we might make would be aimed at further strengthening our public health capacity." Interesting there, saying capacity. Now, two big reasons for this. There is obviously at some point, Public Health England is at some point to blame for what has gone on. There has been a failing. Are they completely to blame for this? Absolutely not. As the guy said in there from Public Health England, they have done the best they can possibly do. Their problem was capacity. Why do they not have enough capacity? Well, a little thing, as you might have heard it before, a word called austerity. Yes, Public Health England was one of the many things that had its budget massively slashed during the Tory reign, and one of the things that we have and will learn, I have no doubt, but it's already been said multiple times, one of the reasons why the NHS struggled so bad, and especially on the answer of protective personal equipment, was because the Tories just refused to spend money on it. The other thing, and this is where it gets really interesting, because Public Health England has a lot to do with regulations, especially when it comes to looking at health and safety, drugs, and other things. So remember on this, we are doing a trade deal with the US. Of one of the things they want is access to our NHS. Now, with Public Health England in the way, that they can't get their complete grubby hands on it. They'll still be able to get, a finger or two there. However, if, shall we say, Public Health England were to just get rolled into the Department of Health and social care, which what might happen, as we saw what happened when the Department of the Foreign Office basically absorbed the Department for International Development. We could just see it just disappear. And if that's the case, then the US will be allowed, and all these, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, will be allowed to go crazy and get their grubby little fingers all over the NHS. And that is why, all of a sudden, Tories blaming Public Health England has another very serious undercurrent. Because if they do that and they successfully blame them enough, and as they say, it gets rolled into another department, or it just just goes completely, then that opens up the way for some serious privatization contracts for the NHS by pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies and other healthcare providers in the US. And there you have a quite scary cautionary tale about why the Tories are going to be blaming Public Health England, probably for maybe the next couple of months, especially if it proves to be a publicly acceptable scapegoat. And this is one of the things that you need to be worried about, because if it does become a publicly acceptable scapegoat, then it can go. And as I said, we lose a protection that protects us from the ravages that the US healthcare industry is going to perpetrate on our NHS.